The Facebook receipts shows that data is power, that bringing together already open source information and the material that we've uncovered reflects that Facebook's influence is strong in DC, but it also goes to show that as their lobbying dollars increase, so is the energy in Congress to do something about this issue. So my name is Zamaan Qureshi. I'm a policy advisor for an organization called the Real Facebook Oversight Board. We were formed in the wake of Facebook's formation of its own oversight board. And the project of the Facebook receipts came about after a number of pieces of research had come to light, specifically around big tech's lobbying and how big tech had used its influence to kill the antitrust bills in the previous Congress. So these were sort of landmark pieces of bipartisan legislation on both the House and the Senate side that had been worked together to try and rein in big tech's monopoly. And more data kept surfacing around how much money big tech had spent. So obviously, working for the Real Facebook Oversight Board, we focused specifically on Facebook. And we wanted to tell this story of how is Facebook using its influence, its dollars, and its machine to essentially convince lawmakers that this legislation wasn't good enough for them. This is broad bipartisan legislation. This is legislation that's been supported in all 50 states, and polling suggests most Americans are in favor of it. But how is this company using its influence to ensure that these bills don't pass? I think the most shocking thing that we found is that Facebook in both the 2020 and 2022 elections gave political donations to candidates in 49 out of the 50 states. So conceptualizing that really shows that, and these were Republicans and Democrats. So sort of thinking that through, a lot of multinational companies will do that, but with Facebook, because there's so much in the public eye right now, being able to have that amount and level of influence on both sides of the aisle has been really critical for them and their ability to sort of use their influence to combat this legislation. And for years, Facebook has told Congress that it wants regulation and it wants legislation. It wants the lawmakers in Washington, D.C. to define what the rules of the road are for tech companies. But every time both Democrats and Republicans put forth new pieces of legislation, it seems that the company isn't interested in working with lawmakers on this or actually supporting any of the regulation in a way that's substantive. Yeah, so Facebook appears to be trying to use its influence to combat regulation that basically hurts its bottom line. The biggest sort of bills that are out there in Congress attack Facebook's business model, which is, ad revenue generating on user engagement. And, from a privacy perspective, that looks like restricting the data collection on, users. From an antitrust perspective, that looks like breaking up these big companies so they have to sell off certain pieces of their business. For Facebook, that might be like Instagram, for example, which is one of its big acquisitions from a couple of years ago. The allegations are that Facebook and many of the other big tech giants are monopolistic in nature and sort of collecting other competitors up in its grasp to try and compete against one another. I think Facebook's dollars spent go to show that for the time being, it's money well spent. But as I talk to more and more of my colleagues in the advocacy space who are fighting big tech, the biggest sort of line that we've started to use, and I think makes sense in this area, is that Facebook is delaying the inevitable. And we've seen that from, lawmakers as they continue to coalesce around these ideas and more bipartisan support on this issue area. So, Facebook, one of their biggest expenditures right now is spent on lobbying. I think that's only going to continue because the animosity towards big tech and the way that it's been, used and misused throughout the country is only going to continue in the halls of Congress, and they're going to have to spend more money to continue combating some of these new pieces of legislation. Money well spent, I guess, for the time being, if we haven't passed anything in Congress, but I think, we're delaying the inevitable here.